Too. My name is Shekar Krishnan. I'm a candidate running for City Council to represent Jackson Heights and Elmhurst. I'm a longtime community activist, a public school parent, and a civil rights lawyer for low-income tenants in our city fighting against eviction and harassment. I want to thank you all for coming tonight too and attending this important discussion for our communities. We are here to talk tonight about visioning and building a community center for our communities of Jackson Heights and Elmhurst. This is something that many have talked about for years in our neighborhoods. Many incredible organizations on the ground have been organizing around for so long too. And I've heard from so many neighbors, residents, friends, organizers in the neighborhood, just how much of a critical need there is for a community center for our neighborhoods, a place that is so inclusive, where we can all come together and build a community, a place where we can have childcare, where we can have activities for seniors, where we can have athletics, art programming, all different kinds of organizing and ways for us to really be together as communities and come together in a very inclusive, multiracial, multicultural, interfaith way as well in this neighborhood. The need is clearly there for it. I also know from my experience with so many of you neighbors in our community fighting to establish Diversity Plaza, to expand Traverse Park to what it is today too, to expand 34th Avenue into the open street that it is as well. We know from these fights, and I've seen firsthand too, how critical it is to have public, open, shared space in our neighborhood. Jackson Heights and Elmhurst rank one of the lowest neighborhoods in the city when it comes to open space. And that is unbelievable given our immigrant communities and given how much in resources that we deserve. But we also know from fights like Diversity Plaza or Traverse Park or 34th Avenue, that these will be fights that we will have to take up with the city to not request, not ask for, but demand resources like a community center for our neighborhoods. And coming out of this pandemic, where we were the epicenter of the outbreak. And that wasn't an accident. That was the result of decades of disinvestment in our neighborhoods. But coming out of this pandemic presents a critical opportunity for us to come together as communities and demand that city government pay attention to us and give us the resources that we've been owed for so long and that are so needed in our neighborhoods. A community center being one of the most important ones of so many that we are entitled to and deserve as communities of Elmhurst and Jackson Heights. But thinking about that and thinking about the organizing and the pressure it'll involve as a long-term fight, as a long-term project with the city in a moment like this, that kind of effort begins first right here in our communities. Together, talking about and sharing our visions, your visions, for what a community center could look like. Why is it needed in our neighborhoods? And what we can envision the space could be used for. This whole effort and this advocacy effort starts with community visioning and input. And then we take that fight together to City Hall, to city government, and demand that they listen to our voices. That's the project, that's the fight that we have ahead of us. And we're all so excited to do this together as community and to hear everyone's thoughts and views and perspective as we think about this. What I see is that this is an opportunity to really think big, to reimagine and re-envision as we think about rebuilding our city, to re-envision and imagine what a community center and a community space could look like for us too. And not get tripped up in, well, is it possible, is it not? But really to demand what we're owed and to demand what is possible for us. When you hear things like, is there space in our neighborhoods for a community center? Well, when we see on Northern Boulevard, how much of that street has been privatized for car dealerships, car parking, and car space, we say to ourselves, of course, there is absolutely public space, public opportunity to have a community center in our neighborhood. There is plenty of space to do so. And in fact, we are ceding ground in our communities and across our city of public spaces with so much potential to privatize development, whether it's luxury developers, rezonings, or car dealerships like on Northern. So the opportunity is there, the space is there, and we clearly all have the imagination to fight for it. And I think tonight is an opportunity to share that vision, to share that imagination of what's possible, and join together in the fight to make it possible and make that demand of our city government, to make sure that they're not turning over resources to private entities and private developers, but that they're actually creating, protecting, and expanding public space, shared public space for our community. Tonight, we're joined by a really great panel of longtime community residents and activists here who will share their perspectives on why a community center is so needed, what are the different ways that a community center can be used for us here, and then we'll turn it over to everyone else to talk about their views, their vision, their thoughts, all of your thoughts for what's possible in this center. I just ask as a logistical matter, just to, with the live stream itself and the audio and video, that if everyone could please turn off their videos and their audio during the panelist portion, it'll make it easier for the live stream to go through from a technological standpoint. And then when we open it up for questions at that point in time, we'd ask everyone to turn on your live stream then, your video and your audio. But today, the three panelists we have are Karen Wellington, a longtime community educator who's done so much around workshops for STEM workshops for young women and girls in our neighborhood, art classes as well, and has been really an activist of so long in our neighborhood too. So welcome, Karen. We're also joined by Nadine Kela-Murphy, a longtime community advocate as well around open and green space in our neighborhood. Also a parent of young and also older children too. Nadine is actually joining us from Senegal, where she is now. So we've been really, in thinking about this discussion in a community way, we've also been going international too. But Nadine, it's so good. I'm so glad you can join and so grateful that you can join us in your time away too in West Africa. And Amadeo, it is so great to have you as well. We're joined by Amadeo Plaza, who is also a public school parent, a PTA board member, and someone who has really been active in our community too around open space and green space as well. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Karen, we'll start with you. Given all different kinds of work that you've done in our community, if you can tell everyone a bit about the kinds of projects that you're involved with in our neighborhoods of Jackson Heights and Elmhurst. Let's start there first, and I'll ask you a bit more about why you see a community center as so essential for us. But maybe you can first start by telling us about what projects and work are you involved with in our neighborhood?
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So I've been in Jackson Heights since 2003. And in 2016, I founded an organization called Queen STEM Career Women. And the mission of the organization was to encourage girls to consider pursuing STEM careers. Most of you know that stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. And we do this by holding conferences and workshops. And both of these events consist of hands-on activities that the girls engage in, and they also get to meet professional women in STEM careers and engage with them one-on-one. Now, the conferences are larger events that are attended by not just the girls, but they bring their families too. They don't have to bring their families, but many of them do. And the workshops are smaller events where the girls get to focus on a particular specific career in STEM and learn about it in a more in-depth way. And at both events, they have professional women in those careers leading them and telling them about the careers and engaging with them. I want to mention that those women and everybody who helps run and organize the workshops, including myself on down, we are all volunteers. It's quite an endeavor to get all these people together and volunteer their time, but many wonderful people do come and volunteer their time. The conference has another aspect of it. It has an assembly program, which has usually some kind of a presentation by a group or a STEM professional woman also. Now, these events have been held at Renaissance Charter School, and we are very, very grateful to them for letting us use their space. They're a great school. They let many community organizations use their space. And we have held conferences. There are two conferences. Unfortunately, the third conference was canceled due to the pandemic. But we've also held several workshops, a couple at Renaissance Charter School and others at various schools in Queens. And it's called Queens STEM Career Women. We call the conferences Queens STEM Girls because they're open to all school-age girls throughout Queens, not just at those schools, but any girls can register and come throughout Queens. I want to say that we have been very successful with the conferences. Over 100 people have attended the conferences both times, and parents, as well as the girls, seem to enjoy it immensely. And the school is very happy with us and loves to have us do it there. I want to mention other things that I do. Shekar mentioned workshops in the crafts. So I've also been engaged in holding origami workshops and jewelry making work. And basically, just for my friends or people who know me, friends of friends, for children of friends of friends. And that's because it's been held at just private homes, my home, friends' homes, just people live in the community, volunteer their space and welcome people to come engage in these workshops and just have a good time together. And the kids especially, I've even done the origami workshops out in Travis Park. Now, it's a little difficult doing it there because it's windy, and when you're doing a craft with paper, it's a little difficult. But we have done it outside as well as in people's homes. And again, everything is volunteer. Nobody is paid for doing any of this. We all do this because we love our community and we love to engage with people and have them come. Now, I also want to mention the Queens Center for Gay Seniors, which I am a part of. It's held at the Jewish Center, which they rent space from. I want to emphasize that it is the only LGBT senior center in Queens. And I also want to emphasize that it's open to everybody. Okay, any senior. Okay, you just have to be respectful of the fact that there are many gay members, but it's open to everyone. They have a lunch program, and sometimes they're just seniors that just stop by to get the lunch. But they also have numerous classes, they have fitness classes, they have support groups, they've had wonderful art workshops, they are expanding. Now, it is limited as to what they can do just because of the size of the Jewish Center. But it's very popular. There are a lot of people that would like to join. They are limited in terms of space, but they're working on that. They do pay for their space. You know, they pay the Jewish Center. They do get funding. They could get full funding for the lunch if they had enough space to hold lunch for more people, but it's limited because of that.
Well, thanks so much, Karen. And you're doing such great work in our neighborhood. So my question to you is, you know, the work that you do engages really two groups that come to mind that I think that a community center would be so important for, our youth and our seniors. And our youth, you, like so many other amazing organizations and organizers on the ground in our neighborhoods, are really engaging our youth in ways that, well, from the work that you do from the STEM standpoint, it's such an excellent way to both advance education, but also gender equity and gender justice too. It seems like a community center could really be such a valuable space to engage our youth in a positive, supportive environment, and provide them with new and different opportunities for things as well that build a community among our young kids and young adults too. You've also talked about seniors and the work that you've done, the Queen Center for Gay Seniors, for example, or other efforts where you've engaged through your artwork, through your advocacy, seniors too. And it seems like, you know, a community center as well could play such an important role for seniors in our community, bringing them together, especially during a time like this where we've all been in, you know, quarantined and isolation in our homes, and, you know, we've not been able to go indoors anywhere too. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about, with respect to both groups, our youth and our seniors, do you think a community center would be important in our community? And if so, what kinds of things could you envision there as well?
Yes, it would be very important. For one thing, I'd like to say that although we're very grateful to the Renaissance Charter School and they love us, there is a lot of competition for getting space there to hold an event. And a community center, if we had that opportunity to hold events there, that would certainly give us more opportunity to have dates and times to hold our events. We would not have to compete with all these other communities because there's just so many community organizations in Jackson Heights that need the space, and we could certainly hold more workshops. We could certainly meet a broader audience if we had a community center where there are people stopping by all the time and they know about us and they could learn about our events much more easily. I mean, we do the best we can with advertising on social media, emails, and so forth. But if we had a place where people come by and know about the center, we could easily reach a broader audience. And we could also have more of an opportunity, especially for workshops where we have to depend on schools to be able to find the space and time to allow us to come to have the workshop. If there was a place where they want you to come and they have the space and the time and it's not competing with everything else that's going on, like in a school, because there is a lot going on in a school, then we could certainly reach many more youth, which is very, very important. Our youth need to be engaged in not just fun activities, but activities where they can learn and grow, and often with other people then they may not necessarily just be hanging out with in the park. But all sorts of people that have common interests that they don't even know that they share. So when they come together in these spaces, they would find out, oh, you know, all these other people I never met before like to do this too. And so it really would be a great place to bring people together. Now, as far as the seniors, I mentioned one important aspect, that if the Gay Center for the Queen Center for Gay Seniors could have a place like a community center to meet at, they could definitely expand their membership, because the Jewish Center is limited as far as their facilities. And as I said, there are lots of people that would love to join, especially and come to the lunch program. They could get more funding, and then have more seniors come that really need it. A lot of seniors just come by all the time because it's somewhere to meet with other people and engage in conversation and so forth. And again, bringing people together that might not have a place to meet each other and talk. It really helps people to connect with others that they might not necessarily meet, because, you know, everybody, of course, just hangs out with their friends and goes to Ricky's for lunch, etc. This would be a place where they could really expand the people that they meet with. So I think it would be definitely a big benefit for bringing people together in a very meaningful way, where we could learn and do things that we may not ordinarily think about doing with other people.
Thank you, Karen. Nadine, you've been done such great work around open space and green space in our neighborhood for years. And, you know, one of the things that I always think about too is how incredible 34th Avenue has been to really bringing so many of our community together during such a difficult time like the present. But of course, now it being cold outside and we're past summer and past the fall, it's so much harder to go outside during this time to on 34th Ave. And, you know, having a public space that's indoors that could be shared together seems like it would be something so important for us too, from the perspective of building community too. So I'd love it if you could talk a bit about your work as well in the neighborhood, and also from the standpoint of public space and open space. What are your thoughts on how a community center could address those issues in our neighborhood, and if it's something that could be helpful for our neighborhood?
Yes, thank you, Shekar, for inviting me here, and I'm very happy to be here with both Karen and Amadeo, and to talk about what I have done in the neighborhood. It's really something that's community work with other neighborhood members, other neighbors in the neighborhood. And it started, I moved in Jackson Heights back in 2003 as an immigrant, emigrating from Belgium. Well, with my husband, who was from here. And in 2005, he had this idea as our son was going to school that's on the corner of Northern Boulevard and 77th Street, that the park that's there, Travers, was overcrowded and could use extra space. And that the space that was used by the car dealership could be used as park. And that's how this idea started. He reached out to other neighbors who joined in, who liked the idea, and it became the Jackson Heights Green Alliance that has been advocating with the Lee Stewart, Donovan, Will, Elena, Monroe. All these people have done tremendous work in advocating and pushing the idea that we can ask for what we need and we can get it and make it happen. So it started with having 78th Street closed only one day of the weekend during the summertime. Then the following year, we had it both weekend days during only summertime. And then the following year, we obtained the street to be closed for the whole summer. And then the following year. So each year we were able to gain a little bit more of space, a little bit more of time in that space to allow for seniors to spend some more time outside, to find a bench, to enjoy the sun, to see the kids run around, to give space for toddlers and young kids to learn to bike on the streets, to make giant drawings, to see theater, to see concerts and music, and also movies at nighttime in the summertime. And then it expanded. And I remember walking down from 78th Street all the way to the community board on I can't remember where it was, but we walked all the way 34th Avenue to almost Corona, chanting, "We want a park," and we obtained that park. And so I'm saying that because it's from a small idea of, I think we should have a more public space, that we were able to get the whole 78th Street permanently closed, or actually there's a bit that was still kept for a dealership, and we are continuing to push to get that space to have our
Absolutely.
entire 78th Street for the community. And so the idea of a community center has started years ago, as Karen said. It's not new, but I think there are many places in Jackson Heights and around Jackson Heights where people in the community are getting services, just like the Jewish Center, just like St. Mark's, or the academics, 82nd Street Academics. There's different places where people are getting services, but it's, how do you say, it's separated. There might be some competition amongst the different organizations and people like Karen who want to organize and offer education and services to the community. So I think having one space, one large space, hopefully a whole block. That's what we need. This is Jackson Heights. It's a dense community where we can offer classes, swimming pool, tutoring, sports classes for our teenagers. In the wintertime, right now, it's difficult for our teenagers during COVID to find a place where they can congregate safely. And I think a community center would be a great place for them, even at 25% capacity. If we had a whole block, it's possible to offer that service to teenagers and to seniors and to toddlers to learn to swim, and to young immigrants who need some legal help or need to learn to write and read English, to find a better job and advance in whatever their dream is, since America has an American dream or offers that. So I think there are many ways that a community center would benefit the community, and the community needs to express itself and ask for it and demand it. And I thank you, Shekar, for giving us the opportunity to do that. And I'm hoping that the community will join in and that we will present this very soon to our city council or whichever authority decides on that, and we will get that happen for everybody in Jackson Heights.
Thanks, Nadine. I wanted to, just before adding on to that point too, I wanted to ask you one question. You make such a critical point about having a place where organizations can also be housed from the stand, not just, a place for our youth, our seniors, for childcare, for, exercise, but also a place where organizations can also, as Karen said too, serve so many of the vulnerable communities in our neighborhoods too, whether it's from an organizing standpoint, whether it's from a legal services standpoint. And it seems like the need could be, it's such a critical need that could be filled by a center like this. There are those who may say, there's no space. How could you, where's the space for it? In a neighborhood like ours, where could you find it? And I'm just wondering if you could say,
I do not
what's your
agree.
response?
I do not agree. I'm sorry, Shekar. I'm going to interrupt you there. I disagree. If you want to give space, there is space. There's plenty of space in Jackson Heights. Just look around on Northern Boulevard. All these spaces are giving to dealership that are not giving 1 cent. I haven't heard of any one of them giving 1 cent back to this community, to Jackson Heights, for second language English learning, for toddlers to learn to bike. Not 1 cent. I've been engaged with the Jackson Heights Green Alliance. I don't recall Mazda offering 1 cent to us for any of the programming that we've been offering for many years. So there is space. Mazda just built a second floor on their dealership.
Exactly. Yep.
They got the city to approve that for them. Why can't we have a whole block with 2 large floors of swimming pool, tennis courts, classes, meeting spaces? It's not impossible, and the space is there. We can find it if we can convince the city to give us back the space that is given to cars. Give it back to us. Give it back to pedestrian. Give it back to seniors. Give it back to learning. Give it back to immigrants. Give it to us, because this is what we need. We don't need that many.
Absolutely. And I think, it's what we've seen. I know you and I are working together too around the getting that car dealership, the Capel car dealership, out of Traverse Park, and how we were promised a whole park, but instead now we have this service entrance from the dealership that goes right into our park space and is so unsafe. It's what you said is absolutely true. It's, to say there's no space is absolutely untrue, because there's so much opportunity around us. And as we were saying before, a lot of it has been for private development and for dealerships. But with the fight that we have right now is fighting the city to even remove a car dealership from Traverse Park, right? So we're all, it's the failure of the city to imagine, and the way in which they just accommodate these interests, all interests except for our own.
Yeah.
But
all these years, they had an entrance on 77th Street, and suddenly they had to take a part of our 78th Street to create a space for cars to go into the dealership, while they could have used that other side the whole time. All the city approved them to add an extra floor to put one car up there so that everybody can see it. No, we want everybody to see that Jackson Heights is organized, is offering many services to immigrants and young people and seniors, and we are going to ask for it. We deserve it, and the space is there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nadine. One of the 2 points that Nadine made, I just wanted to emphasize is one, well, 2 things. One is if I see questions coming in the chat, and if you just want to type your questions in there, we'll make sure to ask them too. And one thing we're going to do as well after this event tonight is also create a petition for our communities to DYCD, which is the city agency responsible for youth and child activities, and for our community centers like these, and to also the mayor to demand that we as a community get this center that we're entitled to, and demand that we're gonna fight for it too. So we're gonna be sharing a petition after this is over. So just keep your eye out for it as well. I want to also bring up Amadeo too. Amadeo, you and I have seen each other with our children on 34th Avenue throughout all of this. They're riding their bikes. They're riding their bikes and we're running after them. So we're somehow getting our exercise in as parents of young kids too. But one of the things is we talk about it from the standpoint of public health, from open space. I also want to talk about it from the standpoint of racial justice too, and how important community centers are, especially in communities of color like ours too, especially for youth of color too, to have a space where they can come together in an environment that's also, as Karen said before, where they're building new relationships and in a supportive environment as well. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about, as a public school parent yourself too, and also a father of 2 young children as well, how do you see the importance of a community center for our youth, and especially the youth of color in our neighborhood too?
No, that's a great question, and I admit I don't have as impressive as a resume as Nadine and Karen, so I appreciate it. And I think one of the things that you said is like everybody's an activist. Like if you're out there, just joining people in a fight, you're an activist. So I appreciate the nod. And I think this is a fight that takes years. So it's great to that this is a fight that has been happening and continuing happening, because it's going to take time, and I think somebody needs to fight that fight. So thank you, Shekar, for taking up that mantle. And I'd say it's incredibly important from I will say from a racial justice perspective. And maybe I might be overblowing it when I see it happen out in the world, but when I go to certain neighborhoods or other cities or other towns, I often find it surprising, maybe it's a tinge of envy, when I see that these other neighborhoods are getting seemingly so much more. And I'm not really sure why. It's not like they're any less densely populated or have any more space in particular, as you were talking about, Nadine. It's not really an issue of space, it's an issue of will.
Exactly.
How do we get overlooked so often? And more often than not, it happens to happen in neighborhoods with people who are people of color. It's just a fact. It just happens more often where neighborhoods with people of color just happen to get overlooked more often. And I oftentimes I get upset about that. And I think when it's important for people to speak up, to fight for these things, because they're important. And I will speak from the perspective of a couple of different angles. One is as a PTA board member and as a public school parent. I've been at PTA functions where it's parties and stuff, and we're just, it can be a madhouse hanging out in the school facilities. And I love the school facility, and I think we should continue to do things there. But having the option of being able to go to a space that's dedicated to the community would make a world of difference. And I don't think it can be overstated how important that opportunity would be. And even aside from that, I think we talked about earlier about just kids being able to interact with one another, just to find a common place to kind of not break bread, but to hang out and interact with each other is really important. I think about how can't remember if it was my prom or my junior prom. One of the proms was at a community center, was at a rec center. And like, that should be an opportunity. I'm talking about my old one back when I was in like high school or something. That should be an opportunity that other kids should be able to have. And selfishly, I will say, like, I just learned how to swim last year. So having a place to be able to swim in the neighborhood would be great. I remember when we were, I forgot what town we were in, but we went someplace and it was very happy to find that there was a place to go swimming. There was a community center and they had a pool, and all I was thinking about was like, how nice would it be, like, if our neighborhood had this amenity? And I can't overstate going back to it. It's just like, the communities like ours get overlooked time and time and time again, and I'm kind of sick of it. And like, these fights need to happen, because if they don't, like, the status quo is to leave us out. That's the status quo. So I appreciate the fight that you're having. I appreciate you including us in this, because it needs to happen. It's unacceptable.
Well, thanks, Amadeo. I would say two things. It is all of us doing it together, and it's really just hearing, this has been a need for so long too. So this is really our communities rising up together to really demand this. And I think, 2 points you made that I think are really important. One are absolutely our schools are so overcrowded. District 24, District 32, District 24 and District 32. That both of them together, District 30 has some of the highest rates of overcrowding in our entire city. And you think about that, and we think about having a space where, in addition, so many in our of our kids in our schools are competing for space within classrooms. They've had to learn in trailers as well, which is absolutely horrendous. And you think about, well, if we had an additional space for young kids to get together too in our neighborhoods, outside of an overcrowded classroom, how important that could be, and how needed that is for our neighborhoods. And I think another point that you mentioned, which is so true too, is the way in which these are systemic problems of racial injustice on every score, from public space to parks to centers. When we talk about disinvesting from communities of color for decades in the way the city has been planned, it's all of these kinds of resources that get taken away from communities like ours, put in other neighborhoods instead, that don't look like ours, that are far wealthier too. And that disparity plays out over and over again. And so when we talk about resources for neighborhoods, when we talk about services, it's a whole wide variety of things, from our housing to our resources for organizations to be able to provide services in our neighborhoods, to, of course, institutions like community centers too. But this is how we also support communities and programs, or what the city must be doing to support communities and programs. So I thank you for bringing that.
It makes me think of something. I forgot I think either you tweeted and I liked it, or I tweeted and you liked it. I can't remember. It was years ago, something like that. But like, the example, a classic example of more modern proportions, is like City Bike. City Bike being isolated to these neighborhoods of wealthy people who don't necessarily need them. And it's like, what? Bring it to the places that actually would benefit from it. And it's just like, you made me think of it. I'm just like went off.
No, it's like these kinds of services, and to make them affordable for our communities too, right? It's that all these corporations and these, services that government contracts out to corporations too, they just cherry pick the neighborhoods they want to be in, and it's never communities like ours too, nor is it affordable for communities like ours. So, I think that's these are much larger failures in our city that we see in all these different ways too. So, thank you for that perspective, Amadeo. I think that, one of the, before we open up to questions as well, I do want to take a second to pause and say, I think we all know how needed a center like this is too. The fight is going to be, as with every other thing for our neighborhood as well, demanding that the city actually engage with us as a partner and respect our community. Because the process, as I understand it too, for the community center is, we also need, there's of course the neighborhood component, our community demanding it. There's also such incredible organizations on the ground doing such amazing work. And to having, an organization or consortium of organizations be the ones to help identify run the center day to day, the expenses that go along with that too, the funding that goes along with that. But it's also a massive investment from the city that's needed too. Capital funding from the city council, from other offices like the borough president's office, from City Hall itself. If you think about, the fight to expand Traverse Park, that involved a lot of city resources and dollars coming into it, even as we identified the space for it too. So from the perspective of how do we make this a reality, a lot of it is also demanding that the city put up those resources that's needed from the council to City Hall and the mayor to really give us those resources and services that we need. And it's a really important point because we as a community will place that pressure and place that demand, and we expect city government to be a partner with us in that effort and to provide us those resources that, especially now after this pandemic, there's no doubt, I think it's exposed and really revealed for everyone to see what we've all known, which is these deep inequities and how much the city government has to do to really address them. So thank you all for mentioning your points too. I do want to start getting to questions as well. I ask that everyone at this point too, you can turn on your videos, you can turn on your audio as well. Put your question in the chat if you want us to ask it. If you want to ask it yourself too, well, you're more than welcome to. And that way we can make sure that we get your questions too. So one of the first questions we had is from Together We Can, an excellent organization that is doing such important work in the grassroots, in our streets, in our community too, is how do we work with the DOE to better utilize our school space for community events once COVID is over? PS 69 is easy to work with, but other schools are more difficult. If we had a group that had insurance who could rent the school space for 1 or 2 afternoons a week, and then smaller groups could sign up to use it. While a community space sounds great, it will take years to come to fruition. We have so many schools here now. How can we utilize them better? And I think that's an excellent point. And I would love to have you all jump into. I just want to add in, that's a great question. And I think it's really the fact that we don't use our school spaces enough for community events, and the fact that it was such a fight to really also, even during the pandemic, to turn the schools into for service and food distribution centers during the height of the pandemic. So many other cities and countries around the world immediately turned their schools and other community institutions into those kinds of places. Here it took time to do. One of the big problems is we've not thought about our public schools that way. The city and the state are so bent on even giving over public school space to charter schools, which is unbelievable and absolutely unacceptable, rather than figure out ways to use our schools as community spaces. So I think it's an excellent question, and it's a matter of really priority, because the schools should be community schools in that sense. If we're really talking about the model of community education and community schools, it means making our schools, which I strongly believe in, it means making our schools a place where you have wraparound social services too, where organizations can actually operate out of as well. One of the biggest problems, and I've seen it with so many of our neighbors in Diversity Plaza, is that we don't have, for example, the insurance all the time or the resources to help maintain and operate a plaza, but that shouldn't be a barrier to our public schools and our public offices being used for these kinds of activities. So part of it is the will to really think about supporting, and the DOE being held accountable to support schools as community schools and community spaces, which I think is so important. I don't know if Karen, Nadine, you want to add to that too, or Amadeo, your thoughts on that?
I agree wholeheartedly. I do think that, yeah, these buildings are supposed to be cornerstones of the community. And to be a cornerstone of the community doesn't mean that you're a cornerstone from 8:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. Like, it needs to, the scope needs to be larger than that. And having worked with, obviously being on the PTA, having worked with teachers and administrators, there's very much an interest to be active participants in the community. I think it's an issue of who's pushing that agenda. Is there a champion for that cause? And I think it makes a lot of sense for that to be a conversation that we start having, because you're right, Shekar. Like, you look beyond the borders of New York, and you find some really interesting things are happening across the country. And there's no reason to take some of those learnings back home and see how we can, amplify some of the things that we'd like to do here.
Absolutely. I think that, the notion of schools being a place where you're providing social services as community schools, the DOE just has not invested in that in the way that it should, and that really needs to happen. And that's a part of really making schools, in the meantime, while we advocate for and build a community center, is having the schools be also places for our community too. Karen or Nadine, I know there are other questions as well, so maybe we'll go to the next question too. I know Steve had one as well, which is, do you have an idea where to site the community center? How about over on 31st Avenue Shopping Center in the defunct Models? I would say to that question too, that to Nadine's point earlier, there are so many different spaces that can exist where a community center can exist in our neighborhood, from sites that people have identified, I know on social media before, to others as well. There's definitely no shortage of space for it. There's a shortage of will. And so I'd encourage anyone, if you have ideas of spaces, if you want to message it or reach out or put it in our petition that we send around too, that would be great, because the more eyes that we have in our community really looking out for space, the more likely it is that we can find it to make this happen. If you look at PS 398, the new school down on 69th and 34th, that was formerly a White Castle office, right? And that was turned and purchased by the School Construction Authority and turned into a public school now that's just open. So the space is there, the opportunities are there, and all of us looking out together as a community, we can identify them. It's just getting the city to be a partner and putting up those resources so that communities and organizations together can make this center a reality. Nadine, I don't know if, or Karen, if you wanted to add to the point about any of these questions too. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next one that we have. If you want to make a point.
Yes, I want to say 78th Street is a great spot where we could have a great center, community center right there, and build on what is already started with the big park, a large space. There's a swimming pool, a small swimming pool at the garden school that is actually the ownership of the garden school, but that area is being used right now, 78th Street, by the whole Jackson Heights community, wherever they are coming from in Jackson Heights. They're coming from 69th Street or from 94th Street. A lot of people from many different communities, born from many different countries, are congregated on 78th Street. I think that area would be great. Across the street from the Mazda dealership is a giant parking lot for Mazda cars. On top of the Mazda dealership where they are exhibiting a like fancy car, that's a big space right there. There's so many places. I'm an advocate of pushing out some of those dealerships out, and they have
I totally agree.
Great spaces. They have large expanses of cars after cars after cars that could be so beautifully used for our community. So that's my point. Just kick one of those dealerships out, and then you have a block.
I couldn't agree more with you. In fact, that I saw someone in the comments mention the Walgreens across the street too that just closed, which presents an excellent opportunity as well. As I understand it, that's also a space owned by the Capel dealership that's got a sign, a billboard on Northern Boulevard that says, let's rename it Capel Boulevard. This is the level of disrespect that our community has been paid by these kinds of car dealerships and by the city that allows this kind of stuff. So, there's already in this meeting alone, there's so many ideas of spaces that have come forward. I think that just tells you that the opportunity is there if the will and the imagination are there. Karen, I know you wanted to make a point too.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with you on your comment of that the DOE has to be invested in that idea, because there were times when I tried to investigate about holding events at other schools in the neighborhood, and it just wasn't that easy to get information, to get people to get back to me, to find out if it was possible or not. Well, then who is the person that you contact? It's not that easy to get that information. And sometimes people would say, oh, yes, you can, and then not get back to me. I think if the DOE were invested in it, then there would be a person at each school, and they would advertise, this is the person you contact if you want to hold an event, or hold classes, or hold workshops. And it's certainly possible. I've been at other towns where they have numerous programs that go on in the evening, on the weekends. That there are a couple of schools in Manhattan that are more invested in it, but that's because maybe the principal wanted to really have it there for the community, so they took the initiative to make sure they provided for the community. But other than that, you know, unless there's someone specific principal at the school that really makes it their business to do it, then, you know, and maybe it never happens. So if the DOE itself was invested in it, then all the schools would be invested in it.
Absolutely, that's such a critical point, and certainly something that even in the short term, when, you know, while we think about and strategize around the space and push the city, the schools are a perfect place for community programs and activities. And it is, as we all know, when we try to host events there, it is not the easiest to always get that space. And there's a lot you're competing with to actually make it happen. But it's also because the DOE just does not prioritize schools that way. And that's really, really unfortunate. I wanted to
highlight just real quick. I'm sorry, Shekar. I want to highlight what a couple of people have chatted in the chat box. The IHOP location is also, you know,
I was like, can we bring up this IHOP?
Old restaurant. If we want to stay on that theme, you know, we got rid of White Castle. Well, that was the corporate center, so they were not sending burgers. But IHOP is a great block right there. Like, it's a giant location.
Absolutely.
And who the hell is going to use the IHOP? Like, I mean, you need to tear it down. Nobody builds a building. Like, who's going to take over the IHOP and then not tear it down, unless you're just going to build another IHOP?
And like, what's the symbol of take away corporate chain space and actually put up something for our neighborhood there too? So, and I see from Rabbi Raquel as well that it's on a bus route directly from Roosevelt subway station too.
Oh my God.
I mean, there's a lot of, the potential is clearly there and the space is there too. And I think that's kind of one of the points that we wanted to make tonight too, is that there is the opportunity to do it. Now I think Liat also had a question as well, and Gabriel Gonzalez. So maybe we'll do Liat first and then Gabriel.
Hi, thanks so much for hosting this. This is something that I've definitely been thinking about for many years. I just wanted to add a couple of points that I think can help our argument here. So the first is, I think the city's finally willing to listen to us more than they have, given that we've been a top affected neighborhood. And I think there's an increasing understanding on the city's part that we not only need civic and cultural space increasingly, given, you know, social justice issues that we've been facing, but also increased need to work from home. And given the amount of, you know, cramped spaces people are working out of, I think that's particularly true in Jackson Heights, as well as skills training, as we realize the disparity in access to good jobs here. And the other thing is, you know, why us in particular? And I think that the fact that we have such a dearth of parks, I know we were second to last, I don't know what we are now, and we're, I think, fifth last in terms of playgrounds. And there's a great 2014 report about re-envisioning the public libraries, where they basically say that Jackson Heights is top 10 in terms of visitors. We see more than 375,000 visitors a year, but we only have 70 seats. And any like library planning document says that the amount of seats Jackson Heights should be entitled to is between 250 and 270 seats. So like, there is a very clear argument to be made here that we don't have like the alternatives that would be provided to a community through like the natural avenues where people can convene. So I just wanted to add that to the argument here.
That's an excellent point, Leon. I'm glad you did too, because I think that one of the things I was going to say is, as we're coming up with the petition together to write this and demand this of City Hall, all of these arguments are really helpful. And I think the way we think about it is exactly what you just said too, is that this is a matter of the opportunity is now coming out of this pandemic. And this is a way to actually fight on all, this illustrates all of the problems of inequality that exist in our city, what neighborhoods get attention and what neighborhoods don't. So I think that's a great point you made too. We want to make sure to add that in as well in our petition that we put together too. So thank you for saying that. I also know Gabriel Gonzalez had a question to make, and then I know Margaret had a comment I wanted to read too, but Gabriel, do you want to ask your question?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. I just wanted to, so I understand that there's a petition that's going to be forming. My question is tailored towards like, so how are we going to ignite the individuals outside of that so that they can take individual action? And the reason why I asked is I work on a national issue with a group, and I see this in other groups as well. I'm not saying that this is the case here,
Sure.
where there's only a few people who are taking the lead, and sometimes it gets forgotten that, you know, how do we ignite the individuals in our community to really take action? Who do they call? Who do they need to write to push that? And I think that if we do things like that, it's, you know, if we're making phone calls, for example, they might not answer my phone call in their own, but they're going to answer your phone call because you guys are the lead. And it's also, it definitely complements that. So I think that that's something to think of in terms of. And then the second thought is, what about the idea of also, since we also border other communities, of doing a joint venture project? So for example, like Elmhurst, for example, right?
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of stuff on the Elmhurst side. I live in Elmhurst, right? Just right behind the train station on 74th Street, but it looks like it's Jackson Heights. And I think it's Jackson Heights, right? And I think that a lot of it is sort of tagged like that. There's sort of the gateways between the communities, but, you know, certainly get those folks involved, and maybe we can get more resources collectively. So those are like my two thoughts. I mean, I know that, you know, we have 34th Street, you know, they opened that up. It's cold and it's utilized. We see Diversity Plaza, it's utilized. And so we know that these things, having a community center will be used and benefit the community. It's just really, how are we going to get the individuals, I guess, to really mobilize them so that we can support you guys who are taking the lead action on this, to cementing this. So that's like a cool kid or something like along those. That's what I'm doing with my group. We're developing a toolkit, but. You know.
I think that's both your questions are so excellent and critical to talk about. So your first point is this cannot happen without everyone together rising up and fighting for this. Not a few individuals, not anyone taking the lead, but all of us together as a community demanding it. Any fight that we've won has been really a neighborhood movement to really organize together and put that pressure on the city. And that I think is essential. And so, you know, one thing I think about is just, you were saying, you know, this petition we put together is for everyone in the neighborhood, or both neighborhoods, Jackson and Elmhurst, to sign together to also express just want to show, the more we can show this is a grassroots demand and the grassroots need here, the stronger the case we can make to the city. And I think of a rezoning fight that I was involved with a 40 organization coalition of all tenants, public housing projects. And one of the things that we did before we turned it into a lawsuit was to stop this rezoning from happening because it violated the Fair Housing Act. We flooded a number of community letters, about 4,500 community letters we got from all over the neighborhoods, from the projects, from rent stabilized tenants, from everyone demanding that Bloomberg and then de Blasio stop this rezoning that was going to happen. And we had, you know, a huge mobilization. We literally dropped off in front of HPD thousands of letters that said, this rezoning will discriminate. We need it to end. And I think that's the power of getting having something that everyone signs on to that we express together, but then having every individual make phone calls to the mayor, to electeds, to the agency like DYCD2, for example, is critical. We do this together as a community. So I think that's the only way it's going to happen. And we have to think about tactics to really make this as broad of a fight as possible on every front, because the more the city is hearing this from everyone in all different ways, the more effective it is together as a movement too. The second piece is, I think you're absolutely right that this is a center. Ideally, we'd have more than one center. The more the merrier, right? One in Jackson Heights, one in Elmhurst, one everywhere. It's obviously a big fight to make it happen, but if we can do it in a way where at least both neighborhoods benefit from it too, that's a critical first step as well. Because it is. Last week we did a whole town hall on how Elmhurst, what we need is really a tenant anti-harassment task force to fight the development and displacement in Elmhurst. These go hand in hand. It's developing institutions and community for everyone too. So I think both of them are really, really good points that you made as well. So we should keep strategizing about ways to do that. And I think it's really important. I also wanted to just mention, I saw Margaret here had a point about investing in green spaces alongside infrastructure corridors like the BQE and rail tracks. I think it goes hand in hand too, that, we look at Northern Boulevard as the boulevard of death now, right? And how many small children have died because of pedestrian fatalities on Northern Boulevard, how fast the cars are going by. We look at the BQE and we look at also the train tracks in Elmhurst too, and all different parts of our neighborhood where we need far more green space as well, as a public health issue, as a climate justice issue. And I think it all ties in hand into our community center too. This is really rethinking the way we think about our streets and our space in our neighborhoods. So I think that's so important. I think, Joyce, I know you're on this call too. I know you had a point. I saw a comment here about something as well. So I wanted to give you a chance. If you want to say something, Joyce, or you can, you'll have the last comment. So I wanted to make sure you had a chance to say something as well. Oh, you're on mute, Joyce.
Good evening, everyone. I'm an organizer who lives in Harlem, impacted by the child welfare system. And I know that a lot of people believe that the child welfare system is here to protect children. But until you become engaged with the system, and I know thousands of people at this point now, since I've been organizing around the issue, that the outcomes for children who interact with this system are terrible. They rip families apart for reasons mostly related to poverty that are framed to be neglect. 8,000 children are in the system right now between the 5 boroughs, and less than 15% are there for reasons related to abuse. So yes, while I agree that children need to be protected and kept safe from families or people who would be abusive towards them, I want to bring awareness to the fact that the other percentage of children were removed because there was a lack of food in the home, parents got them to school late, clothes was dirty, reasons that are related to poverty. And once you're entangled in the system, what it takes to get out of it and the harms that's created and the outcomes for the children. Any system, I'll give it to you very quick because I know we only have a couple of minutes. Just think about this, visualize this. Criminals are strip search. Children are strip searched under the guise of checking for marks and bruises, even though they came under the surveillance of the system for reasons related to food or other things. If a child is removed, they're isolated from everything they know and love, just like prisoners are isolated. They both have set visit times on set visit days. They both have oversight during the visit period. They both eat what they are served. And in lieu of time, I'm not going to go through the other 1,000, but I'm going to say at the end, they're both paroled back to the community or to their families. And they both have oversight during the parole period. And they can both be removed again for any minute reasons. It's terroristic to snatch a child from their parent when we could provide support. But most importantly, thinking about this system looking just like a system that is a system of punishment for adults is foundationally wrong. That alone tells us that something needs to change. Whether we agree that children need help and for what reasons they need the help, we have to fundamentally agree that a system built to protect children should not have the outcomes that it has and should not look like a system that tortures adults. So I just want to bring attention to the work that I do. And I don't know if people in your community have been impacted by this system. I got a call from a young lady in Queens tonight who just happened to Google, help with ACS and came up with my name and found me through my website, which is jmac4families.com. I just need the support, not only of people who've been impacted, but other people who can and who are willing to learn what the system does, how it operates, who's impacted, and the reasons that they're impacted. Again, no system built to protect children should look like a system that tortures adults. And their outcomes should not be they're 75% less likely to graduate high school, 75% more likely to be teenage parents, 75% more likely to be drug addicted, 75% or higher more likely to be homeless, more likely to be on mental medications because changing homes every 5 to 6 months. I met someone who was in the system for 5 years and she was in 60 homes. That's 1 home a month over a 5-year period. Mm-hmm. And so every time a child changes homes, there's a different smell, There's a different taste of food. There's a different rule and regulation. It's mental torture. And so we have to come together to say that we want better for our children, because wanting better for children and families that's impacted by this system is saying we want better for society. We cannot dream of having a society that we want while we're destroying a whole generation of children and families. So I'm going to put my information in the chat. Anyone who would like to know more, who's a part of a club or anything that would like to know more, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to share the knowledge that I have. I changed major legislation this year. I have a coalition built of about 30 attorneys who are major supporters of changing the system, impacted people, and others. So I'll put my information in, and I won't be long-winded. And thank you guys for allowing me the time tonight.
Joyce, anytime. Much love to you. You do some of the realest work in this city. What you say is absolutely true in the way in which the child welfare system is not about the welfare of the child, but the twin of the criminal system. And Joyce, one of our platform issues on family justice, I know how instrumental you've been in talking to me about it and talking about these issues and all the work you've done on the city and state level to really fight against a system that tears Black and brown families apart. So I think, thank you for sharing information too. And we want to make sure when we do a family justice panel as well, I want to call you up to talk about your work too, because it is so critical and on the front lines of really issues of both family justice and racial justice. And I think just that point too, in terms of a community center, this is how important resources like a community center can be for our youth, and especially our youth of color. Instead of punishing them, instead of locking them up, instead of ripping them away from their parents and their families, it is actually creating support systems and institutions where they feel supported, they feel loved, and they feel like they can build community. And I think, Joyce, you framed it so well and powerfully in terms of how our city treats young Black and brown children right now, and how we could actually think of a world and a city that's far different. And part of that is creating spaces in our neighborhood where we are actually supporting our youth in building community, building friendship, not tearing them down, not taking them away from their families, not using government as a vehicle to take children away from their families. The exact opposite of that model are things like a community center and spaces where our children can actually thrive and be supported. And I know you've been doing that work to really call attention to these issues for so long and have such tremendous love and respect for me too. So thank you for all you do, Joyce. And thank you for being a part of tonight too. Absolutely. And thank you all so much. I think what we've seen tonight too is how much there is a need for to make sure that we have a space for our community. And I also see that there's so much comments as well about how we need space for our immigrant communities too, our Latino communities, our South Asian communities, our Nepali communities. As our communities grow, and we also see the Nepali community growing tremendously as well, to have space for our immigrant organizers and residents to organize, to advocate, for immigrant groups to come together and provide such needed services in our community, for housing groups to come together and provide services to our tenants. I think we see the many different ways that a community center plays such a vital role for our neighborhoods. And now we need to demand that of the city. And I think tonight we've heard so much about all the different ways that we can use a space and the needs that it can help fill for so many in our communities, especially our most vulnerable and our most impacted too. So I thank you all for coming out tonight. This is just the first step in a long fight, but a fight well worth fighting. As we know with every other fight we've done as a community too, there is tremendous opportunity here as well. So I want to thank our panelists. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Amadeo. Nadine, special shout out for calling in from Senegal too. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who's joined tonight's meeting too, who's really come out to make your voices heard. Please continue to share your vision, share your thoughts, share spaces where we could actually cite the center as well. And now the job is to really come together as neighborhoods and put that pressure on the city, on our electeds, on our mayor, especially, to give us the resources that we need to make this happen. There's a perfect time right now to do so. Coming out of this pandemic presents such an opportunity to call attention to these issues of inequality. So thank you all so much. You can visit more of our website and more information about our campaign. Also is www.voteshekar.com, www.voteshekar.com. And let's all fight together to create these spaces for our community. So if you want to email too, as we put in the chat as well, your ideas for a community center, your vision and your thoughts, even where it could go, please email us at contact@voteshekar.com. So we've got an hour at this point. I want to be mindful of time, and I want to thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you to all the panelists too, and see you soon and talk soon. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
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 Thank you, Shekar.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.